Okay, it's recording now.
Fantastic. Good afternoon, folks. Good morning, or wherever you're based. This is Mark Beggs from Mind's Eye Education, and another episode of Mark Talks 2. And today, it's fantastic. I'm talking to Matt Welsted, and he's the Assistant Chief Constable for the West Midlands Police. And this is part of our series that we're doing, talking to different police forces and different officers on all different levels, and see how dyslexia has helped them, given them challenges in the police force, and how they've overcome that. So, Matt, thank you very much for making the time, because I know you're a very busy individual.
Oh, Mark, it's really good to have you interview me and on such an important topic. So great to be with you.
Fantastic. So, Matt, the first question we always kick off with is, what was your first summer job?
Oh, my first summer job. Well, I used to work in retail. So I worked for a number of small sort of retail organisations, and then moved on to the giant that is Marks and Spencer's, and worked to their, both in retail and their customer service department.
Right. And so did you work there full time before you joined the police?
I didn't know. I worked there whilst I was doing my A-levels, and as a bit of a Saturday job beforehand, and then as I sort of finished A-levels, I pretty much worked full-time hours, but joined the police when I was 19, so it wasn't long before I joined the police full-time.
So before we go talk about the police, so you didn't get diagnosed until you're about 42 years old. So what was school life like for you? And working in a summer job, did that show you something different about your dyslexia?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, school life, first of all, I was really probably a story of two halves. So I was really very strong at the sort of maths, the science, I suppose the communication skills, very sporty as well at school, which helped, as it does, doesn't it, in terms of sort of, relationships,
yes,
and popularity and things like that to a degree or not. But I was very weak at maths, particularly English, particularly English language, history, anything that required that sort of reading, writing skill set. So so I was very much a tale of two halves, highlighted by my GCSE results, actually. So my GCSE results, most of your listeners won't remember what GCSEs are, of course, because I now realise just how old I am. But yeah, I got what at the time was A's in maths and science, and E's in English language and English literature, and that sort of 5 grade spread tells you there's something wrong there.
Yeah, and like it's funny. I asked someone else this as well. Like, here we have an organisation which is very heavy on paperwork, very heavy on reporting, very heavy on detail, and here's someone who's not very good at English and not very good at reading, and you decide to join the police force. So was that for punishment, or what made you choose that?
No, that's a great question. Well, I joined the police because what I learned in my early jobs was I was pretty good at communicating with people. I was pretty good at managing sort of, I suppose, that relationships that you have when you're dealing with a dispute. And actually, I've always been sort of action focused. So there's a lot about policing which really appeals. The values, the drive, the every day is different, the sort of problem solving, and above all, the communication, but certainly that speech and language communication piece, really strong. That's why I joined.
And that probably shows why the summer job. I tell people the summer job is so important, because I'm dyslexic, and up to 14, you've been told every day you're stupid, you can't read it, you can't do this. Suddenly I go into a job working on the car ferries for the summer, and a manager telling me, "That's fantastic. How did you work that out? That's brilliant." And you suddenly see, wow, I have a skill set. And so was it the same for you?
Oh, yeah, it absolutely was. And I think, so if I go back to my first sort of job in retail, I didn't have to do any paperwork in that environment. What I needed to do was be organised, move stuff around, make customers happy, logistically solve problems. And that absolutely lent itself to me and my skill set. So yeah, my confidence grew in that real world work environment. The same actually applied when I joined the police. So the police is a really diverse type of role, isn't it? Of course. So I was really strong at the communication, the decision making, all that. I'm very confident in that space. really very unconfident in the statement taking, the written reports side of the business. And, you know, I had some really challenging times in my early policing, which I'll happily sort of share with you and your audience about it. But overwhelmingly, what I did learn from jobs was that I have got strengths and skills.
Yeah, and it makes a huge difference when you suddenly realize, hey, I can do that. I'm good at that. Because then you can bring that, you basically flip your whole personality, don't you? And you bring that to the forefront and you sort of mask the other bit because you want to show people how strong you are on talking, communicating, and getting in touch with people.
Oh, totally agree. And it's an interesting thing because I talk a lot about dyslexia and neurodiversity as a general topic now, and I often describe the superpowers. It's not because I think I have any superpowers, but it's designed to break apart the fact I am actually really quite good at certain things, and the things that I'm not very good at nowadays in 2025, they're easily adjusted for. And now
Absolutely.
being so I'm going to say old again. I'm not that old. I'm only 49. But being sort of older and more experienced, I suppose being aware of who I am, I'm aware of the sorts of things that make a massive difference to me as a dyslexic adult. So really quick example for you and your audience.
Yeah.
I hate reading. I've always hated reading. I find it a horrible chore, an exhausting chore to read the written word. But I'm really good at listening to things. So I have software that reads documents to me. I do a lot on sort of Audible books and things of that nature. But I've managed to build that sort of approach into my working life. And actually, what that's made me really productive because I can listen to things at a sort of double speed and process them in a way that even my neurotypical colleagues sometimes struggle to get through the amount of written work that they have to read. So yeah, superpowers, strengths definitely play to that.
Yeah, and thanks to modern technology, because like the certain books I can read, like Jeffrey Archer and Linda Platt, there's no problem booking those during the holidays. There's others. I was reading a book very recently. My wife, my daughter-in-law gave it to me, and my wife said, I need that book after you. I said, no problem. A week and a half later, I was still on page 2. Because every time I got to page 2, I fell asleep because it was taking so much energy in my head. I just couldn't read it. The text, everything was wrong about it, and that's one of the challenges. So when you joined the police, like considering when you joined, all 29 years ago, what was the biggest challenges you faced directly related to your dyslexia?
Yeah, so well, I think the first bit was, of course, I didn't get myself diagnosed until much later in life. So I didn't know.
Like you were 42. That's a good bit into things.
Oh, very much so. Only when my ability to adapt and overcome, and you used the phrase mask earlier on. I did quite a lot of masking in this area. I didn't know I was masking, but I do when I realised. Exactly right. Only when I ran out of road is the way I describe it. Did I then get myself tested? And just because it is relevant. I've got 3 children. They're all neurodivergent. They were tested for dyslexia. When I was reading their reports with them, I was sitting there thinking, that's me, that's me, which is one of the reasons why I think of adults, particularly when they have children who are neurodivergent, they get themselves tested because their kids are dyslexic or whatever it might be.
And they see themselves there. They see themselves in a younger version. Yeah. Exactly
right. But so one of the biggest challenges I had was the fact that part of a police officer's job is to produce written work. The obvious example here is a witness statement.
Yes.
So one of my most uncomfortable memories and one of the periods of time for me was whilst I was a probationary constable. So I had a senior experienced officer helping me learn the job. We got sent to a police station to go and speak to a witness who had been robbed. A young chap who'd been robbed, and part of my job was to take their witness statement. So I sat down. I was quite nervous, but I sat down and I started to try and take a witness statement from that member of the public. So frustrated was my colleague with my poor handwriting, because it's also handwriting I have a challenge with. Poor handwriting, my poor spelling, my poor grammar, and the fact that I wasn't very good at producing the work to their standard. They reached across the desk, literally pulled the statement out of my hands, tore it up, and described that as rubbish. Start
Wow.
again. Now,
Wow.
I normally, when I tell this story, I normally pause there because I think it's important that we just think what that must have felt like for me, but more importantly, for that member of the public that had already gone through an awful experience of being robbed, but then to have the police come in front of them and for one to criticize the other's work in that environment. You know, I
Oh
was,
yeah.
I was
The confidence in the police and the confidence in the individuals out the window.
100%. So not only was I embarrassed because I was, you know, a professional, I'd worked hard, I'd got to that position, I got through basic training, I'd managed that sort of stuff. This was about me sort of refining my skills. Not only was I embarrassed, but I was also embarrassed for my job and the police and that member of the public. That felt awful, didn't it? So
Yeah.
anyway, I tried again. I got through the experience. I had no real idea about what that member of the public felt or how good a service I gave them on that time, because of course my world had collapsed in that space. And I walked out of that interview room. I went home. I was upset, Mark. I was really upset.
Yeah.
And what
Well,
I suppose
yeah, go
I
on,
suppose
sorry.
what I did there was I decided never to allow that to happen again. What I didn't do, of course, which I would do now, what I didn't do there was go and face it up and say, look, you know, I've got problems with reading and writing, or I found that really difficult. That's what I would encourage. But back in 1996, that
Yeah.
felt like a mountain to climb. So I hid it and I avoided that sort of work for a long period of time, really struggled.
But that must have been hard because, Matt, you were looking at years ahead of you taking witness statements. Like, it's not as if suddenly you say, can I go into a different division doing something else? Like, the core of what the police do up to a certain level is witness statements and taking reports and that. Like, that must have been, the thoughts going home and the next few days must have been horrendous.
And it was really difficult. And obviously, what I started to do is what a lot of people who are dyslexic or neurodivergent do is I started to work on, well, how can I get better at that then? How can I work harder at that? And I started to practice having statements from other people that I could effectively copy the structure from.
Right.
As soon as computers started to become a thing, which is hard to remember, but in 1996 there weren't such things as computers.
No,
You
there
know.
wasn't. No.
But the moment they started to come along, I started to use technology in that space. And you know, cutting it really short, I managed to hide that away from me as much as anybody else, and focus on the things that I was really good at. And I've had a great career, been
Yeah.
highly successful all the way through policing for such a long period of time, right up until I hit my 40s. Did I not effectively have another challenge so dramatic and outstanding as that? It was only in my 40s, trying to become a chief officer, that the tests that I had to pass for that space, I hadn't prepared for, I hadn't developed strategies for, because they were so obscure from my day job. And that coincides with me getting tested for dyslexia.
Right. So that was the catalyst for you going, right, everything else is fantastic. I know. And when we're going to get tested, like in 1996 and all, like I was diagnosed at 35, and even I hid my report, and it didn't really mean a lot to me. Like, it would have been the same for you in 19, like all this happening. But when you were when you were going for the new roles, did you think you were dyslexic, or were you still wondering what's going on?
So I had no idea, if I'm entirely honest. I
Okay.
knew, don't be wrong, I knew I hated reading, I knew I hated writing, I knew that I had strengths in communication. I could see processes in my head, literally visualize them, because of course I'm not just dyslexic, I'm also ADHD. I've never got myself diagnosed with
Great mix, isn't
ADHD.
it?
My children are all ADHD. I am ADHD. You know, 100%. I've got it, and that's normal for people who are neurodivergent.
There
Rarely
is, yeah.
are we one thing. So I knew that I had an obsessive personality, hyper focus, we sometimes call it. So I knew all of my strengths and I knew my weaknesses, but I was able to, very fortunately, and through some, you know, compassion around people who worked with me, being able to manage the things I weren't very good at for all the way through my service. But you're right, I avoided the sorts of exposure that would have played to my weaknesses, and definitely took the opportunities that played to my strengths.
Right. And then when you went and got diagnosed, What happened? Like, did a light bulb go off? Like, what changed for you?
So I mean, we probably haven't got time in our conversation today, but the way in which I got diagnosed, the nudge from it is worth mentioning quickly, if I may, because
Yes.
it was a colleague of mine. It was I'd just gone through an assessment. He was an assessor on it to become a chief officer. I failed the assessment, but in his feedback to me, he asked me outright a series of questions that led to me getting myself diagnosed. He asked me, Mark, when was the last time you read a book?
Right. Okay.
And I
Yeah.
said, what do you mean? I've mastered. What do you mean? I read all the time. I get loads of emails. I read the internet. And I said, no, stop. He stopped me. He wouldn't have it. He said to me, when was the last time you read a book? And I said, I listen to books all the time. I've got it. No. And he tried a third time. And of course I said, I think the last time I read a book, I might have been 14. And he basically said, Matt, that is not normal for a high performing executive in the police at 42 years old. Are you dyslexic? And I said, I don't know. So my children were dyslexic. I could see myself in that report. I went and got myself tested. I get asked a lot about why bother, or should I bother getting myself tested? For me, it was essential because it helped me understand, and it gave me the vocabulary, and actually, if I'm honest, the legitimacy as a high performing, I was a chief superintendent at the time, a high performing person in my career, to be able to legitimately go, actually, I am dyslexic, and this is what I'm really good at, and these are the things that I'm struggling with. And of course, translating that into the legislation, this is what I need from the organisation. And I'll be honest with you, it's not a lot. Don't need much.
Yeah.
Because actually, I just need a few little bits about. Don't ask me to read in front of lots of other people, and don't let me have some technology that helps me listen to the stuff rather than read it. Most of this sort of stuff is either free or very, very simple to go. So it was a light bulb moment, I suppose, because it gave me the language and the confidence to talk about my weaknesses, and also in doing so to raise awareness, because as soon as I also got that diagnosis, Mark, and this will come as no surprise to you whatsoever, I started talking about it.
That's my next question. Like, when you started to tell your colleagues and people who were junior colleagues and people who reported into you and all, like, what was the initial reaction when because people look up at very senior people and they assume everything is perfect, the head's perfect, the mind's perfect, everything's perfect, and then they give that statement, I'm dyslexic. Like, how did that go down among your colleagues?
Well, let me tell you my wife first, because actually I think that's the hilarious one. Because I went and told my wife I got self-diagnosed. I said, darling, I'm dyslexic. And she went, oh, of course you are. It's obvious, isn't it? It's because of course it is obvious, isn't it? It's obvious to everyone that knows you. You just don't have those conversations. You don't do it. So when I started talking to my colleagues, first of all, I was really fortunate. I had a lot of support from that space. I had a lot of people that actually they started asking me questions about what that meant. And what was really interesting, there was a lot of my colleagues that went, I do that. That happens for me as well. Because what I then started to see was a lot of people, and I'll use the phrase, came out to me about the fact that they too were dyslexic, or they suspect they were, but never got themselves tested. And that's part of the reason why, of course, I put myself forward. I now am the National Police Chiefs Council lead for neurodiversity. I speak a lot about dyslexia in policing and the strengths that can bring, because actually I think policing is a natural home for people who are neurodivergent and specifically dyslexic. So our data, ignore our data. We've got a lot of work to do on accuracy, recording our employees' data. But I think there is a large proportion of our workforce who are neurodivergent and highly successful at all ranks.
Yeah, and what would you say though, if you have a mother or a father or someone and their child has come home and said, look, I'm thinking of joining the police, but they know their child is dyslexic, and the first thing a lot of parents would think, oh, would you not become like people told me, like, would you not become something that you don't need to read and write and all that type of stuff? What would you say to them about the police force being the right home for a lot of people who are dyslexic?
I mean, I'd say exactly what I've just said there, which is that there's a huge proportion of people in policing who are neurodivergent from all different skills, because it's the skills that we want in policing.
Yeah.
It's the problem solving, the communication skills, the tenacity, the drive, the values, the attention to detail, depending on what your neurodivergence is. But specifically dyslexia, there is a lot of people in policing who are highly successful. The other thing I'd say as well is talk to your child. Because your child, even I've got 3 kids, I'm very blessed. They're all incredibly different, but I can already see their individual strengths. And that's the right thing, I think, as a parent. Start to understand what is your child good at, because if we're not careful, society starts to focus on the things that they're not good at. And that's been a real bone of contention for me for a long time. Play to people's strengths. Let's work on what they're really good at. Let's try and align them to the natural careers that implies to. And almost in 2025, assume whatever the challenges are, they can be dealt with. There are strategies, there are technologies, there are reasonable adjustments that can deal with the things that people find more difficult, because we want to unlock their strengths, don't we not?
We do, absolutely. And listen to you, I would say you're a big supporter like me of get your children diagnosed early so that the challenge they are going to have ahead, I mean, the tools are now being put in place now, not in 20 years or 25 years time when they get diagnosed. Get them diagnosed early.
I think that's essential, because and don't get me wrong, I know how hard it is as well, because I've got, as I say, I've got 3 kids. There's a huge amount of fabulous people who work in education, but the process of education is not great for helping you see the differences in your children. The educational health and care plan, I don't want to get into politics, but most people would say that's a broken system. And certainly my experience of it is it's very, very difficult to get what you need in that area. So naturally, I think parents will go to their teachers and ask them the question, but I don't think their advice can be reliable at this current climate. So I would say exactly what you've said there. It is worth the investment to know and get your children diagnosed, because it takes time for your child to come to terms with their strengths and to develop the strategies. That's a fancy word, but the way in which they accommodate the things that they're not very good at. And they might have to try a few things. And you want that early enough so that when it comes to those key moments, and it's often that will be things like exams, that you're going into the exams from a position of confidence. You know what you're good at, confident you know what to ask for, and that discussion around reasonable adjustments is dealt with at the earliest and lowest possible level. So absolutely, I agree with you. It's worth the investment.
And even all the adjustments, like, it just means it's a level playing field for when you're going against someone else in exams or promotion or career. It just levels the playing field if you know you can use all these resources. And you're able to go looking for those resources. Like you're using audio, you're using other stuff to help you, like in your career, and it works really well.
So I totally agree, and it's often people who aren't familiar with this get a bit uncomfortable. They can't quite work out, am I asking for favourable treatment, or is it unfair? That's just not the case at all. So don't forget, nobody goes to work to do an English exam.
No.
So the process, the standardized test process, is the bit that is not normal. And that's why we need to give people adjustments, because nobody would normally work in that way. And it's the same for promotion process. If you're talking to people at work, we don't go into those environments in our day job and work in that way, because actually, if it was just assess me at work, how good I am at work, well, I probably don't really need many adjustments, because I'm already successful and I've already achieved them all, if that makes sense. So it's trying to get people to recognize that sitting an exam, no matter what that looks like, is not normal. It is an abnormal experience that will disproportionately disadvantage people who process information differently. And what you want, of course, is you want to be able to come out with your strengths. You want to be able to explain what you're really good at. And you know, if any of your listeners are in doubt, what I would, one of my favorite sort of ways of looking at this, right, is look at those people who are highly successful in their chosen field. Doesn't really matter what the field is. The obvious one is technology, but it could be sports, it could be politics, it could be anything else. A huge majority, I would say, of the most extreme people who are really good in that event are neurodivergent.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yes. Yeah,
Because they play
agree.
to their strengths, and those strengths gives them the ability to be exceptional, which of course is what we want.
Yeah, and also people be amazed of who these people are and that they are neurodiverse. Absolutely, yeah. So, Matt, it's been fantastic talking to you. Now, just say to people, if anyone is looking for more information, first of all, about joining the police and all in the UK, or what help is available around dyslexia in the police force, you have the Police National Dyslexic Association. I got that the right way around, didn't I? I did. I keep mixing the initials up, so that's why I have to keep it written down long ways. So and if you just go into Google and just put in police and dyslexia, most times Police National Dyslexic Association will come up for us. And you can email in there, and there's tips and resources, all that type of fantastic stuff that will help you if you want a career in the police. And then, Matt, they close off. So if anyone's looking, is there any one tip you would say to someone if you are going to join the police and you know you're dyslexic? Is there one tip or one bit of advice you would say to someone?
Yeah, so I might even steal a few minutes and say two really quickly.
The
first bit is, when people look at policing, they only ever think about police officers. Now, there's a huge array of police officer role, but all police forces are also very complex businesses. So I've got everything from car mechanics to doctors to lawyers to software engineers to people who work in project management to investigators. So policing is a big ecosystem. It's the first piece.
Right, okay. It's good to
absolutely
know. Yeah.
And some of the people who are the most successful in the work that I've been doing for the last 29 years are people who have found their niche. They've really sort of got their round peg of them into a round hole. And policing gives you that variety of roles that really could play to your strengths. So think about policing broader than simply police officers, is the first bit. And then the second bit is kind of just a repeat of what I've said before, right? Play to your strengths. Confidence is really important. Play to your strengths. Yes, be open about any challenges you've got. So do tell us immediately, right at the start, that you've got dyslexia, that you're dyslexic and you need adjustments. All police forces will make reasonable adjustments for that process. We're well practiced in this area. We'll support you through the training. We'll help you learn how to do the job as a dyslexic officer. And what we want then is for you to settle, get comfortable with it, and then to unlock your skills. And I think that thinking differently could be just the key we need to unlock the solutions we need for the future. So definitely policing is a great career for people who are dyslexic.
Fantastic. So will you be the first dyslexic chief constable?
I will not be the first, no, because of course we already have.
Do you? Okay, see, there you go.
2 dyslexic chief constables. So, and isn't that an interesting thing? This is the highest position in our chosen field. I am not now exceptional. There are plenty of chief officers who are dyslexic and who are neurodivergent with different conditions. And I think it's brilliant that people have come out and they have been able to achieve the highest ranks.
And it's great when you hear people saying they are at that level, because it makes a huge difference to everybody else coming up underneath. Huge difference.
100%. And it's been fabulous to have a chat with you today and to highlight the power of being neurodivergent and being dyslexic. I really wish all of your listeners the opportunity to take advantage of what they will be brilliant at, undoubtedly.
Brilliant, Matt. And just say to folks, if you need any more information, mindseyeeducation.com. And as once again, if you are looking for information on the Police National Dyslexic Association, if you email them in, they are your resource. Matt, thanks very much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks a lot.